From Mayor Tecklenburg's audit to his thoughts on the Emanuel Nine and the Charleston Nine, I speak exclusively with Charleston City Council member and Charleston mayoral candidate Gary White for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And be sure to download the free Quintin's Close-Ups app in your Apple or Google Play stores. And subscribe to my YouTube channel. Gary White, it's so good to see you back here on Quintin's Close-Ups.
Great to see you, Quintin, as always. Thank you for having me.
Oh, anytime. First and foremost, how do you describe Gary White, mayoral candidate these days?
Very busy. I've been very blessed. We've had a tremendous amount of support. The momentum's building within the campaign. It's been a lot of work. We expected that to be the case. We'll continue to work. We got about a little less than maybe 5 months left to go, and things are going great. So really excited.
Exciting. Let me turn to the Charleston Nine. Obviously, you posted this just recently on your Facebook page, and we all remember them on yesterday. You said this quote, "The two overwhelming tragedies Charleston has suffered in her recent past will always be a part of our history. The 9 courageous firefighters who lost their lives in the Silver Superstore fire will always be remembered for their sacrifices and fulfill their dedication to saving the lives of others. The immeasurable loss to the loved ones cannot be forgotten." When you look back to 2007 to now, where does your mind go to?
And I recall very distinctly the event, as most did. We were sort of glued to the television stations and watching what was happening and unfolding in front of us. And it was the most significant fire tragedy and loss of life that we've had in our city's history. And so we've been very lucky in one respect that we haven't lost many, but in this case we lost a lot. And one of the things that I think that I'm very much reminded about, and as I talk to firefighters, and they have a saying, and that is to never forget. And so the opportunity for us to, I think, take this tragedy, learn from it, I think we have. I think we've made a lot of good strides and movements within the fire department, and we'll continue to do so to make sure that we protect not only our citizens, but our firefighters who put themselves at risk every single day.
And of course, we're not going to forget about the Emanuel Nine, who lost their lives.
Right.
I know where I was when I got the news. I was on my bed reading the Twitter tweets that night. Can you tell me where you were and where are you emotionally 4 years later?
So I remember distinctly, I was standing actually in a condo. We were actually on vacation that night. And a friend of mine who was in the police department sent me a text, and he said, "Gary, we need to talk. There's been an incident." And I said, okay. And it was probably about, I guess at that point, maybe about 8 o'clock at night. And he said, "No, Gary, we need to talk right now. There's something that's really significant occurred." So of course I stopped everything I'm doing and picked up the phone and called him, and that's when he told me the story. We all sort of had the same emotions all at the same time. We all wondered what happened, why it happened, what was going on. We knew that there were loss of lives. We didn't know how many, but most importantly, we didn't know why. And I think now that we all look back, we had fear, we had anxiety, we had sorrow, all of those things all at one time. And the family members and the survivors days later, and the way that they moved through the grieving process, and then subsequently taking probably one of the most courageous steps of probably the world has ever seen, and forgiving the gentleman who did these things to their family. And it's something that we should all be reminded about. I took my daughter to the premiere the other night. I was glad she got a chance to go. I think we all should take that opportunity to teach our children. We're only going to stop racism and bigotry by making sure that we start at home, explaining to our children, and making sure that we teach them that everyone is created equal in God's eyes, and that's the way we should treat one another.
If you were to become mayor next year, how do you deal with racism and bigotry, as you mentioned, in 2020, 21, 2022?
So unfortunately, we have to come to the realization that it exists. That's number one. And it's very sad, but it is the case. But I also think that we have to build very strong relationships amongst all of us and within all our communities. We have to be inclusive of all our communities, and make sure that we fight every day against racism, and let those who might perpetrate racism know that we absolutely are against it, but more importantly, we won't stand for it within our city.
Let me turn to the audit. This is the headline from livefinews.com. It says this from obviously May 14th. Charleston mayor agrees to financial audit after councilman's accusations of improper spending. And obviously, as you know, this transpired during the Charleston City Council meeting where a lot of allegations came out. What is the biggest difference between May 14th and now in your mind?
Well, I will say that since that period of time, the auditor has begun his work, and he created a list from that evening of the things that we said that we were made aware of that we would like him to look into. They were allegations at that point, and we were fairly confident that those allegations were accurate. Actually, a number of the policy violations the mayor had admitted to that evening. So, but most importantly, our responsibility as City Council is to ensure that if there is any wrongdoing or anything inappropriate going on, that we've taken those steps to make sure that we've either addressed them or identified that no, there is no issues and let's move on. But it's our responsibility to make sure that happens, and that's what we were trying to make sure we did.
You talk about that list the auditor has actually drafted. If you were to look at that list today, is there something that says, hey, we need to extend this for at least 90 days?
You know, I talked to the auditor briefly after he generated his list, and I don't know what all is on the list, by the way. I should preface by saying that. I just know that the list grew from after that meeting. And I asked him, I said, do you need more time? And he said he felt like he could get it done in 60 days. And I said, well, the most important thing, Robert, and our auditor's name is Robert, and I said, the most important thing, Robert, is that we're not concerned with how long it takes, but as we're mostly concerned with making sure we get it done right. So if you need more time, you just simply need to let us know.
What else is in an audit that people should know about right now?
So some of the things that I think that what I anticipate are going to come out of this audit ultimately, I don't think, and I don't know for sure, Quintin, but I don't personally believe we're going to find criminal behavior. I don't think that's what was going to be uncovered. What I do think is going to be uncovered is probably multiple policy violations. And some have said, well, you know, this is sort of slanderous, if you will, against the mayor's wife, and it's not appropriate. I will tell you that this really has nothing to do with the mayor's wife. This is really the mayor, because he's the employee, and the policy violations were violated by him, not his wife. And so I just want to go on record and making sure that your viewers recognize that this has nothing to do with Ms. Tecklenburg. This has everything to do with the mayor's activity. He's the employee. He's the one who may or may not have created policy violations. And if he has, then we'll need to deal with those and make sure that nothing has occurred that's so substantial that it does become a criminal activity. At this point, I don't believe there to be that case, but I'm not the auditor, and I don't know where he's at in that process identifying it. But we want to make sure that we've gone through all the steps necessary, that if there is something egregious that has occurred, that we've at least said, please look into it. Let's make sure that we don't have any problems. If we do, we'll deal with them. And if we don't, we'll say, great, let's move on. We can clear the air.
How many policy violations are you talking about?
Well, there are 3 policy violations that we know of that were identified at City Council that night. Number 1 is misappropriation of city resources by way of spending city taxpayers' dollars on the business cards, as was identified. The second was a travel policy violation and procurement violation, where we understand some of the mayor had been purchasing the tickets for Ms. Tecklenburg for his travel with her travel with him, I should say. We think that he's paid them back, but that's really a policy violation, a procurement violation, using city credit cards and resources to buy spousal plane tickets and things like that. And then the third was a policy violation around the use of city vehicles. And I will say that that's, of all those issues that we uncovered that evening, that's probably one of the most substantial, in that it created a substantial liability by way of a non-employee driving a city vehicle, which means that we would have likely been uninsured, and should she have had an accident and hurt someone or herself, we would have likely been sued. We would not have insurance that would have covered it, because our insurance does not cover non-employees. It's for our employees only. So that's a significant issue that we did find, and hopefully that has stopped, and that she's not using city vehicles anymore.
How long was she using this prior to this discovery?
I personally am not sure of the answer of that, and I have not personally seen her driving
Okay.
city vehicles. I asked the mayor point blank at the city council meeting if she did, and he said yes, she had been driving the vehicles, but I didn't ask him how long. I figured that was really for the auditor to determine, what had occurred and what had transpired. So.
And obviously, Mayor Tecklenburg is welcome, as always, on Quintin's Close-Ups. I'm still waiting on an interview with him, so hopefully he can sit down and set the record straight as well.
Certainly.
But let me turn over to West Edge. This is the headline for the Post and Courier. On the hook for rent at West Edge, Charleston decides to lease space to entrepreneurs.
Right.
Why entrepreneurs? Why now?
So that's a good question. So the city, and I want to go on the record making sure your viewers know I did not vote in favor of this. I was one of the few dissenting votes against this. Right. The city ended up leasing space at West Edge before it could go under construction, and it took about 8,000 square feet under lease. We had no use for the space. We had no intentions of anyone to use it. There was no need for city space. There was no need for anything at all. It was purely done in a way, in a manner so that the developer, a private developer, could get to their pre-leasing requirements on the building to get their funding from their bank to begin construction. That's it. I am firmly against city using taxpayers' dollars for anything associated directly with the benefit of private developers. Now, I have a lot of friends who are developers and colleagues that are in the real estate business, and I appreciate very much what they do. And I'm not against the West Edge development at all. What I am against is the city using taxpayers' resources to further a development that's for the benefit of the private sector, and that's exactly what the city did when it took that lease on. So fast forward now from the first, when we originally took the lease on, and it created at that time about $1.5 million in tax liability for the city of Charleston. That's directly coming out of the general fund. Think of how many ditches we could clean with $1.5 million and eliminate flooding. But the priority that the mayor set was that he wanted this project to come out of the ground, and he agreed to do it. And in this case, he got enough council members to agree to do it with him. I not being one of them. So fast forward to today, or last week, or excuse me, this week. We had the mayor went out and identified the digital corridor, which are great folks, and Ernest Andrade does tremendous work with what he has done, and he got the digital corridor to agree to effectively manage the property, still for the city, and effectively go out and look for and find tenants to go into that space. And accordingly doing so would allow then for the city to be able to create some level of rent, but it would still not collect all. We'll still have a fairly significant loss. Even under those terms, if we leased 100% of the space out, we're still going to lose about $400,000 a year on that transaction. So over 5 years is still a significant amount of money lost for the city. So effectively and if we were to move forward, and that did get approved with that transaction, we have to pay not only for the lease, but we also have to pay a portion of the build out, meaning it's only a shell that we're buying. There's no sheetrock on the walls. Yeah. So part of that is going to be at the city's expense. And when we do that, the developer will put some level of improvements to allowance in there. And what that triggers is in a penalty. So if we were to break that lease within 5 years, that creates a penalty on top of the lease that we already have in place. So
how much would all that add up ultimately in your mind?
Right now, I calculated the other night that we're about $2 million.
Before the city, I guess, signed the lease on this, did you all know this, or did you find out some other way?
We found out when we got our agenda packet on Wednesday before the city council meeting, which unfortunately is exactly how we find out about everything that comes from the administration. The lack of communication and the breakdown of the ability for the mayor to communicate with council has created a lot of challenges for us in the city. The hotel issue that we seem to take about 3.5 years to get fixed, that could have happened a long time ago if the mayor had communicated with us the way we asked him to. And this is just another example. When we find out about things that the mayor wants to accomplish or wants to bring forward to council 72 hours in advance of the meeting, it's it's inconceivable why somebody would think that we have enough time to digest and make good decisions with that little amount of time. But unfortunately, that's kind of what we've had to deal with over the last almost 4 years now.
You talked about earlier about the tax, I guess, funded resources. How many resources have you all been able to use thus far?
Well, in this case, I don't think that for the West Edge, they hadn't actually expended any resources yet.
Okay.
That's the good news. However, as of Tuesday's City Council meeting,
Right.
it now sets forward in motion that they will begin spending money and doing the build out. And so, unfortunately, we will start spending money probably in the next 30 days on that project. And so here we are. It is what it is, and it's like I said, I fought very hard against it. I tried to keep it from happening, but unfortunately, I wasn't able to get enough support on council to stop it from happening. The mayor was able to get his votes that he needed to make it happen, and so now we're going to end up spending about $2 million on it of taxpayers' money. And I just, Quintin, when I think about all the things and the challenges that we have going on in the city, and all the things that we could put $2 million towards, flooding, affordable housing, traffic congestion, infrastructure improvements, you name it. I can think of a million things better to do with $2 million than spend it on leased space that we have no use for.
Why now with the West Edge? What's the city's ultimate goal with this?
That's the whole point, Quintin. The city had no goal. From day one, when that transpired, the only goal that John Tecklenburg had was to make sure that private development got the pre-leasing requirements that they needed in order to get that project financing approved by their bank.
Okay.
That's it. That was the only goal. We had no user. We had no need. And quite frankly, it's the most expensive, really probably the nicest Class A space in the city of Charleston. What in the world would we be doing putting city offices in that kind of space? I mean, we deal with taxpayers' money. We have to be much more mindful, in my opinion, on how we use our taxpayers' money.
Let me ask a complicated question here. How much money has, you may not have this information, but how much money has the West Edge received from the private investors?
I don't know, but I can venture a guess that collectively that will be several $100 million of investment in the buildings that they've created there. And there's 3 buildings. There was 2 that had already gone up, and this will be the 3rd. So.
And when you talk about the Charleston Digital Corridor, are they going to be paying the city of Charleston, or is that going to the West Edge?
So they're just managing the building for the city, so that they will be managing and bringing tenants in, and that money will come to the city as rent. Unfortunately, it won't be enough to completely offset the expense that we will have for the space, but it will offset some.
Between, obviously, now and November, can you explain to the average person who is Gary White beyond city council, beyond family man?
Right. Well, you almost just nailed it. That's about I'm a businessman, and I always have been. I guess I carry the moniker of politician because I've been doing it for 12 years, but I really don't see myself as a politician. I'm a businessman at heart. I'm a big family man. I do spend every waking moment that I have, opportunity that I have with my family. It's the number one thing that I want to do when I have free time. And I do work very hard to make sure that I do give the appropriate amount of time to all of the things that I do, whether it be in my business, through city council, or with my family. I do enjoy water sports, and I enjoy fishing and all of the other things that a lot of us who live in the low country enjoy, which is wonderful. I've raised all my children on the water, and so they all have learned how to fish and crab and oyster and everything else, and try to pass down to them the same things that I was taught when I was growing up here in the low country. And most importantly, the reason why I like it is because when I take out my children on the boat, I've got them as a captive audience. There's no cell phones, and there's no TV, and there's no Netflix to distract. It's just me and my wife and my children, and that's really the way I like it.
That is so great to hear. Well, Gary White, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate this.
Certainly. Thank you, Quintin, as always.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.